Hello people of the Worldwide Recipe Index, I'm Mr. Spork, and these are Mr. Spork's Hands. I was playing that time-honored game of what can I make for dinner tonight with stuff I've already got in the house, and I was coming up short on a couple different answers. I saw that I had a bunch of yellow squash left. I was thinking about maybe with some corn making some succotash, because it's that time of year, but quite frankly I really like lima beans in my succotash, and I just flat didn't have any. So that answer was out. Then I saw, hey, maybe I've got some rice, maybe some vegetables. I could do like a vegetable biryani. If you've never had biryani, probably seen it on Indian restaurant menus, but you basically saute vegetables or vegetables and meat sometimes, and then you put a layer of par-cooked rice on top, pour something interesting and flavorful over the top of it, and bake it off in the oven so that the rice stays nice and light and fluffy. Basically, you seal the pot down really well with either a dough ring or a couple layers of parchment or foil. That works really, really well, but the flavorful stuff you pour on top is usually spices and yogurt. So I went and I grabbed my yogurt, and I was out of yogurt. So that wasn't going to be an option either. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take two half recipes that are completely unrelated. American succotash made with squash and corn and beans, and a vegetable biryani from India. I'm going to mash them up. I'm going to throw in a little bit of celery, onion, and garlic just to round out the flavors. And because it's Canada, we can barely grow a tomato, so I'm going to throw in a bit of canned tomato, which I'd normally put into my succotash, see if I can't round out those flavors. I'll walk you through the whole process bit by bit, and we'll see how it works out. I was actually going to stream this recipe experiment for you guys live online, but quite frankly, I've got to rearrange the whole kitchen and get some longer cables and stuff. But if you guys like that idea, leave me some comments down below in the comment selection and let me know that, hey, that's a good idea and I should hurry up and get the kitchen rearranged and those cables ordered and such so that I can do live streaming. All I'm doing here is cutting the fresh corn off the cob, and I want you guys to notice what I'm doing. I'm starting in the middle and working my way down. Normally I'd do this in a big bowl to catch the kernels, but that reflects all kinds of crazy light into the camera. But what you want to do is make sure, after you do the bottom, you flip it over and do the bottom, but make sure that you're using the whole length of your knife to cut. That is a direct from Jacques Pepin tip, to make sure that you really use the knife to cut those kernels off. Get them as close to the core as you can. Save all that lovely sweet juice. And you know, even one ear of corn, if you're running low, adds a huge variety of flavor and sweetness and texture. So definitely get some fresh corn in there, especially this time of year. Talking about my beans to go with the corn for the succotash half of the equation, all I did here, you guys that have watched regularly know that I am an absolute nut for dry beans because they're so much cheaper. Soak your beans in cold water overnight. You don't want to do the quick soak method on the back of the packet. Soak them for 8, 10, 12 hours. You can actually soak them up to 3 or 4 days in advance. As long as you change the water or drain them completely and keep them in the fridge, you can keep ready soaked beans for up to 2 or 3 days before you're ready to use them. I oftentimes soak a batch of beans on Sunday, not knowing when I'm going to use them, but knowing that I will use them sometime in the next few days. But anyway, after they've soaked cold, you put them into a fresh batch of water with some good salt. Always salt your beans. They've proven that the old salt makes your beans tough myth to be wrong time and time again. Salt them and boil them till they're just tender, anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes. You want to go at least 30 minutes to get them to that stage. I like cooking my own dry beans too because I can leave them kind of slightly undercooked to finish cooking in whatever else I'm making. So these I boiled for about 40 minutes, drained them off completely. That's what's going to go in there. On the rice, switching over to the biryani side of things, this is par-cooked rice, not pre-par cooked that you buy in the store that way. This is just regular rice, and I boiled it in a whole lot of water, plenty of water. This is not the absorption method. Boiled it for probably 5 minutes, and it's still got some tooth to it, still al dente if you want to call it that. But then drain it off completely because we're going to add this par-cooked rice in on top of the vegetables later on, and it will finish cooking in there. We're going to add some liquid to it to give it the liquid it needs to absorb, and what I'm using is this lovely and delicious thing that looks like a dark beer, but it's actually not. This is just some ordinary vegetable stock that I made myself. Please save all your scraps, all the ends of your squash and celery trimmings, all the little nubs of garlic off the end of that you trim when you knock them down to take the skins off, ends of onions, carrot peels, all of that sort of stuff. Throw them in a big pot with water once a week. simmer them with a little bit of salt, maybe a little bit of soy, and here's a magic trick for making your own vegetable stock at home. I don't know how you guys in England eat this stuff. Marmite tastes horrible to me. Same for you in Australia eating Vegemite. I think the stuff tastes nasty, but having said that, 1 little teaspoon into probably 3 quarts of stock adds an incredibly good flavor to your vegetable stock. If you want to turn it into chicken stock, go right ahead. Throw in some chicken bones, because all of that stuff that you boil for an hour, hour and a half, you end up straining out and you end up with something like this. It is beautiful. It is dark brown and clear and has all kinds of flavor and glutamates and such in there. That is going to be tasty liquid. We're going to put that in on top of the rice to flavor it and again give it the moisture it needs to soak up. Just going to finish with my squash here. This is again thin-skinned summer squash. You could use anything that you've got green or yellow. You can use, if you call them courgettes or zucchini in your neighborhood, that's fine. But you want to leave the chunks relatively large because they are going to, of course, cook down in that mix that we make in the pot. So nice big chunks here. Whatever your garden is producing lots of will work perfectly well. On the celery, I want to add just a little bit of celery to add some bitterness. I always go to the trick of peeling, or cracking I should say, and peeling off those strings. Even though they sometimes call it stringless celery, I still get a few undesirable ends there. And I want to cut that relatively fine to go with my onion here, because it will, of course, add that lovely celery bitterness throughout the whole dish. For spicing on this, to be honest, I'm not really sure, but I will probably go with just a little bit of sweet paprika and some fresh herbs out of the garden. I'm not going to add anything particularly strong, no chilies, probably not any mint, although if I can scrounge up some yogurt, I might end up making a mint sauce to go over the top of it later, like a raita. But whatever spicing you've got around, probably fresh herbs is going to be your best bet here to keep it kind of light and delicate. We're not trying to turn this into a curry. We're not trying to turn this into a Tex-Mex fiesta, although those might be good too. I don't know. But that's what I'm going to do for flavoring with just a little tiny bit of garlic thrown into the mix. So back to the cooking setup. I got just a couple tablespoons of oil in there, and I got my aromatics, my onion and celery simmering away nicely. Got to get my garlic in here, using my trusty old Susie garlic press that I've had literally for 15, 20, Jesus, is it 25 years already? I think it is. For a very long time I've had my old-fashioned garlic press. See a lot of really silly garlic press on the market these days, but quite frankly you could use a rock if that's all you got, or chop it fine if you're not as lazy as I am. So get those going. You don't want the garlic to burn, of course. That's the tragedy of garlic. If it burns, it ruins the whole dish. So only until you can smell it, 30 seconds or so. I'm on a fairly low heat here because I'm not looking to finish all of this on the stovetop. I'm going to go in the oven with it afterwards. But once you can smell that garlic, which I can just about now, I'm going to go ahead and go in with all of my corn and squash. I'm just going to cook it down a little bit. Remember, it's going to finish in the oven, so give that a few minutes to do its thing while I get some other ingredients on tap. I've got my tomatoes, and oddly enough, I had a little bit of leftover tomato soup, which, you know, why not? This is what cooking on the fly or improvisational cooking is all about. Use what you got. But I do want to get just a little bit of, just a tiny little bit of color on that squash first. So let's give that about 3 minutes. This is coming along nicely and doing what I want, probably 3 or 4 minutes later. While that continues to cook a little bit more, I should say a few more things about my rice. First, a little trick that I read many places and have used often. I soak my rice for about 45 minutes before I boil it in this particular case. A lot of times there are other cooking methods for rice, but this is what's worked best for me to get those really nice distinct grains. Also, your choice of rice is important. Basmati would be preferred here. That's going to give you those nice separate elongated grains, but if all you've got is long grain rice like I did tonight, go ahead and give it a try. It's not going to kill you, and it will certainly taste good. It just may not have quite the grain separation that you're after. The other thing, after I parboiled it for about 5 minutes, I drained it really well, put it in here, and then I put in probably 2 or 3 tablespoons of plain old vegetable oil, and then began to fluff it with a fork, and that helps, again, separate the grains. Probably not necessary if you've got full-blown basmati, but that's not what was in my cupboard tonight. So use that oil fluffing trick with long grain. You're going to get some good results there. I think this is softened down just enough. Again, I don't want it totally cooked. I'm going to go ahead and put in just a little bit of my tomato consomme, tomato soup left over there. I'm going to go in with most of my crushed tomatoes. You could certainly use diced tomatoes. That's what I would normally use in succotash, but I think a little bit saucier consistency is going to be better for my rice dish. And then in with the beans. This is probably going to look like one of the weirdest colored dishes you've ever seen, but hey, I think it looks kind of nice. I'm going to let all of this heat through, and that's probably going to take another 5 or 10 minutes. Now that this is heated through, for the most part, I'm going to give it a pretty reasonable dose of salt. All my tomatoes and other ingredients haven't had any salt at all yet, so a good dose there. I'm going to go in with my stock here in just a second, but I want to make sure and get that salt distributed throughout. And you know, I think I may have lied to you earlier. I think I am going to go ahead and put in just a little bit of my magic chili sauce. This is just ground chilies with vinegar and salt. Any pepper sauce will do, but I think a little tiny kick, not much. Don't go nuts with it there. And I want to get in quite a lot of really good peppercorn, freshly ground peppercorn. Succotash for me was always defined by a pretty significant dose of black peppercorn. I think I might be addicted to black peppercorn, but that, if I get there, that's, you know, I'm probably getting close to a teaspoon's worth in there. Again, give that a mix to distribute it through. And now comes the Biryani Technique, if you want to call it that. I'm going to take my pre-cooked rice and I'm going to pile it over the top. I did 2 cups of dry rice. This is a 4.5 quart casserole, or Dutch oven I should say. I think it's 4.5 quart. I think that's about right. So I've got almost 2 cups of rice in there, but you saw I've got about an equal measure, 2 cups of dry rice I should say, soaked and par cooked. That works out to probably 4 cups of rice, and I've probably got about 4 cups worth of vegetable underneath. And now to give the rice that extra moisture, since I've got probably another cup's worth of liquid that needs, I'm going to give this maybe 2 cups worth of liquid. It's going to be a little bit saucy in my world. Again, I'm making this up on the fly, so who knows? There we go. That's about a cup's worth in there. That should be good. And what I've done is I've prepped my lid by using a bit of foil. That foil is going to help seal it down nice and tight. You can even feel that it fits nice and tight. I've got my oven on a relatively gentle 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 Celsius. Don't even ask me what that is on gas mark because I don't know. But this is going to go in the oven until basically the rice is cooked the way I want it. Anywhere from maybe, I'm going to guess anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. I'm going to check it at 20 and see where it's at. You just don't want to cook it all the way into mush. Okay, Spork friends, this is straight out of the oven. I haven't even peeked yet myself, so it's going to be a surprise for both of us. Let's see how we did here. Pull that steam off. It's going to steam up the camera. Sorry about that. And there we go. And you can see that those grains of rice have plumped up to their final consistency and texture. I think that's looking pretty good. Let's dig down and see what we've got. Is this biryani? No. Is this succotash? No. Is this some weird mutant in between? It's probably not even that. It's not really anything that you can define, but because of all those beautiful vegetables on the bottom, it has flavored and perfumed that rice all the way through. I think this is a fabulous, quick little casserole, and I hope it encourages you to go and experiment around, use some of the techniques. If you learned something, I'm glad. If you didn't learn something and you have some questions, leave them for me down in the comments section and I will try to answer them for you. And again, let me know if you guys like this sort of improv on the fly cooking, and I might set up some live shows for you in the future. Until next time, I'm Mr. Spork. These are Mr. Spork's hands, and it's time for me to go have some Biryani Tash, or whatever we're going to call this. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers.